we're doing bread and butter pickles today. I've had a lot of people ask me about them, and I wanted to make sure we put this together for you while cucumbers are still in season. You need about 6 pounds of cucumbers. You'll need about 3 pounds of onion. And to start, you're just going to need these 2 ingredients and some pickling salt. The pickling salt that I generally use is what I purchase through Ball. And it's just it's a coarse salt. It doesn't dissolve as easily as like a fine table salt. It doesn't have any iodine in it. It's perfect for pickling, so we'll be using that today. The recipe that we're following today comes from a recipe book that I've had for 20 or 25 years. It's kind of my Bible for canning. I put it into this binder, which is well used. This is the book. I get it from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and you can get this through your local state ag extension agency. And what I like about it is that these are tried and tested recipes, and they will give you lots of information in the beginning of the book about basic canning tips, and then detailed recipes, including adjustments for altitude. And that's really, really important. I'm at sea level, so I always use sea level measurements here for recipes and timing. We love bread and butter pickles for putting onto sandwiches and burgers. We almost think you can't have a burger without it. I'm going to show you step by step how we make it today, and we're going to start by slicing down our cucumbers. So the cucumbers I have accumulated in this bowl, I've been saving up in the refrigerator for a few days to make sure that I had enough. The little ones here are perfect for dill pickles because they don't have any seeds in the middle, they're tiny. So if you watched my easy refrigerator dill pickle recipe, this is the perfect size and you can use for that. But these big guys start to get a little seedy in the center, and they're not ideal for doing dill pickles anymore, but they're perfect for bread and butter pickles. I just start by cutting off the ends, and you always want to make sure when you're pickling to cut off the blossom end. That's the end I just took off, not the stem end, although I take them both. You never want to can the blossom end because there's an enzyme in there that'll actually cause the pickle to get soft. So if you've made pickles in the past and they're not crunchy and they're soft, that might be part of the reason why. I use a mandolin when I do this. You're supposed to use the guard that goes with it. It's just not my style. Just be careful and make sure that you watch your fingers. You want a relatively thin slice. And this is about the thickness that we're looking for. They say a 3/16 inch slice is perfect, and that's about what we have here. We have some errands to run today, so I'm starting this and I'm going to put them on ice with the pickling salt on top of it, allowing us to have it sit for at least 3 hours in the refrigerator. But you can see these are perfect slices. You want to think about something that you would want to put on a sandwich, although sometimes I find my family just eating them with a fork right out of the jar. I'm going to end up filling this bowl with cucumbers by the time I'm done, so I'm just going to slice right into it. And while I was slicing, my son got out a jar of pickles from the refrigerator because he decided that he needed to have a bite of them. So I thought I'd take a moment to show you what they look like when they're finished. These are from last year, and we are going to end up with a totally different color. This is from the seasoning that we're going to put in. We'll talk about that in a little bit. It's a sweet pickle with a little tang, and they really offer a nice little crunch and a lot of sweetness to a burger or a sandwich. I also love to chop them up and put them into salads like tuna salad or chicken salad. It gives a nice little flavor. So you might ask what you would do if you didn't have a mandolin. Certainly you could hand slice these, but it's a lot of work. If you have a food processor, you probably have a blade that allows you to individually slide things down inside the food processor and make thin slices, and that's an option too. But if you want to get into pickling, just go get a mandolin or borrow one from a friend. It does make the job a lot easier. Okay, I'm finished slicing cucumbers, and here they are. It's about 6 pounds, and I'm ready to go ahead and start with onions. I have yellow and white onions today. I don't think it matters which one you use. I just wouldn't use a red onion. And all I need to do is cut the ends off. And I like to do my slices in half rather than whole slices because it distributes through the jar a little easier. It's totally your preference. So I'm going to pull off the outside skins. And instead of running them on the mandolin whole like this, I am just going to make a cut in half and slice them this way. So it's going to take me a few minutes to get through these, get them processed and ready to go, and then we'll come back and show you. I don't often use the guard when I'm doing the cucumbers, but I do like to use it when I'm doing onions. And you can see inside the guard they have spikes to hold the onion in place. Really great way to keep your fingers safe. If you do get pieces at the end, it's okay to just bring a knife in and just slice those up. You just don't want big chunks of onion in here, but a couple of pieces that are odd shaped isn't going to hurt a thing. All right, onions are sliced. We're just going to go ahead and throw these in with our cucumbers. And the salt goes right on top of here. Just going to mix it down through. And it's a half a cup of salt for this recipe. So this recipe that I'm following today was 6 pounds of cucumbers sliced, about 3 pounds of onions sliced. Don't stress, if it's 2.5, it'll be okay. If it's a little over 3, it's gonna be okay. That's about 8 cups of sliced onions. And then a half a cup of salt. And again, use the pickling salt, don't use table salt. Did something fall out the front?
Yep.
Uh-oh. Now you do need a pretty big bowl to put these in, because you have to put ice over top of it. So if you don't have a big bowl like this, just split it and do it in 2 separate bowls. No big deal. The pickling salt is a half a cup sprinkled over top, and this just has to sit about 3 hours in the refrigerator. We're gonna go run errands while this works its magic. If you don't have enough ice in your freezer, you might want to stock up ahead of time, make sure you have enough. I was really lucky this year. We butcher our own chickens here at home, and to do so takes a lot of ice on butchering day. So my husband and my son found an ice machine, and when we turn it on, we get a lot of ice at once, which I am very grateful for. You really want to cover it. Make sure that they're fully covered. This is going to do the job of making them nice and crisp. All right, that's pretty well covered. About 3 hours in the refrigerator, and it will start to melt down. It's okay if it melts down. It'll still be super cold. We'll come back and do the next step after we run some errands. Well, one of our errands included going to the local Amish bulk food store, which I usually go alone, and it saves me a lot of money. Today I took Jonas. Say hi, Jonas.
What's up?
You don't usually see him because he's behind the camera. And he found that the bulk food store isn't just about buying bulk flour, bulk sugar, and bulk produce. What he found was that they had a nice variety of snacks.
Some wafers, some colored circus peanuts, some gummy worm, and some Cheez-Its that are down here.
I don't know why I allowed this, guys. This is why it costs more to go to the grocery store when you take teenagers with you. We have to get focused. We have to go home and finish our video.
Yep.
So we're back from the store, and we picked up a few supplies that we were missing. I'm having a hard time finding extra canning lids right now. It seems like a lot of people are joining the canning revolution, which is awesome, but it is making it a little hard to find the supplies. Luckily, I have some really good bulk food stores nearby, and we found some extra lids. So I have more to finish today, and I've had plenty of time to allow my cucumbers to sit and get crisp. One thing I wanted to mention about this recipe, and really any recipe for bread and butter pickles, is that if you want to add pickling lime to this, they make them even crunchier. I haven't had any complaints in our household about not having crunchy enough pickles, doing it the way I do it, but pickling lime is a really good way to get more crisp pickles. It's just definitely something you want to be careful not to inhale when you're using. Pickling lime can go up into your respiratory system. It's not good for you. Somehow or another, it's fine when it's on the pickles, but it's not something you want to breathe in. So for equipment, one of the best things that you can do is get yourself a heavy bottom pot. As always, I recommend a heavy bottom pot, maybe even something with an aluminum core. But you definitely want a good stainless steel pot. And I always say non-reactive. That just means stainless steel with a like, so that you don't have the flavor of the metal imparting into your food. Second to that, you'll need a pot that you can start canning in. And right now I have my jars in here. I'm using pint-sized jars today. If you wanted to make them in quart-sized jars, that's perfectly fine. The timing in the recipe varies slightly, and I'll tell you about that when we get to that stage. I've washed them completely. You can wash these in your dishwasher because you are going to put them in hot water and sterilize them. The most important thing is to come along and check the tops of your jars for any cracks or any chips. They have to be completely clean around the top so that when you put your lid on top of it, that rubber seal makes direct contact all the way around and it sticks and adheres to the jar. So this is the last one. We're just going to plunk down inside the water here. I've already got it started heating up. And that's just to sterilize them to make sure that we don't have any bacteria in the jar. All right, so we have this pot to make our brine and get started with our ingredients in just a moment. I have my jars started in my pressure canner. You do not need a pressure canner to do what we're doing today. This is water bath canning, but I had it out because I was doing something else pressure canning this week, so I'm gonna go ahead and use it. But if you have a large, heavy bottom pot, even this, you could process in here because you're just water bath canning. But I would recommend that you put a rack on the inside of the pot if you want to do that. That way they're not sitting on the bottom. We've talked about that in other videos. If your jars sit on the bottom of the pot, you run the risk of them cracking. So you need a pot to cook in, a pot to can in, and then you need a small pot. I have my lids and rings in here. I like to put them in together and pull the whole set out at once. I'm also going to heat those up. That softens that rubber ring and sterilizes the tops. Okay, so we went over the supplies that you need, and now we're just going to talk about ingredients. Aside from the cucumbers and the onions, you need the following ingredients: sugar, vinegar, turmeric, celery seed, not celery salt, and mustard seeds. We're going to combine those ingredients into this pot to make our brine, and once it's boiled and melted the sugar, I should be able to go ahead and start adding my cucumbers and onions into the mix. So let's go through the recipe of what you need. I'm starting with 4 cups of white vinegar. To that I'm adding 4.5 cups of sugar. Get these out of the way. And, ooh, that vinegar's strong. I need 2 tablespoons of mustard seed. I always do this over the pot. If you get a few extras, it's not a problem. I'm adding 1.5 tablespoons of celery seed, and we add a tablespoon of ground turmeric to this recipe. All right, this pot is going on the stove, and as soon as all of that sugar melts through, then we're going to be able to get started by adding the cucumbers and onions. You can turn it on high and let it start to boil, but don't get away from it. We don't want that sugar to burn. Just try to pull the ice off the top of here. Sometimes it sticks to the onions, so go ahead and pull those off and leave them in. I've had times when I've left this longer than the 3 hours, and sometimes I even don't have room in the refrigerator and I leave it on the counter. They all come out the same, so don't worry about it. Some of the ice that melted down in, leave some water in the bottom, that's no problem at all. But there we have it. They're really cold right now, and there's a couple of ice cubes in there, which is totally fine. What we don't want is to have it so cold that it brings the temperature of the brine down when I put it in the pot. If you've ever made bread and butter pickles and you stood over the top of this pot full of spices, sugar, and vinegar, and got it up inside of your nose, you'll never ever forget it. So don't get too close there. My sugar has completely melted and I'm ready to start putting cucumbers in here. Now the color will start to change. Push them down inside the brine and let that come up to temperature. So once you get back to this boil, you can shut it off and then we can go ahead and start canning. Ooh, they smell good. Everything that comes in contact with the pickles needs to be sterilized. So the jars are in here being sterilized, the lids and rings are sterilized in this pot. I just do them separately so I don't have to dig them out of the bottom of the big pot. But here comes my funnel, that's how we're gonna load them. The tongs that I'm going to load them with have been in here as well, and it's time to pull the jars out. I mentioned it in other videos before, it's worth investing in one of these. This is a jar lifter. And you can get right around the edge of the jar and pull it out and dump them out. This is so hot that you really want to do this with the right tool instead of trying to use tongs. I used tongs for a long time when I first started canning. I got burned enough times with the water running down my arm that I decided to go ahead and buy this tool. My funnel goes on top, and I start with the tongs so that I can pick them up and drop them down in here and keep my jars nice and clean. And then I'm going to need a ladle to go ahead and get some of that brine out of the bottom of here. And this brine, you're always going to grab a couple of onions with it when you go, that's fine. You need to leave about a ½ inch of head space in the top of the jar. Head space is defined as the space between the top of this jar and the top of the product that's inside of it. That's about 3/4, so I'm really coming just to the bottom of my funnel. I'm going to move it to the next jar, and what's a really important step to remember is to make sure that you get the air pockets out of the jar. Again, sterilizing my knife. And I'm running my knife down along the side to get any air bubbles out of it. Oftentimes when we're doing this, all the air comes out, the level drops. So I'm going to add a little bit more brine to it to bring it back up to level. ½ inch. All right, I always have paper towels available. I just like doing these with paper towels. You can use a rag or whatever as long as it's clean. Very hot water. I'm wiping off the top of my jars. This is really hot. And then I'm taking my lid lifter, grabbing my lid and ring, and right on top. Now this gets a little warm. Okay, they're pretty hot. The bottom of the jar is pretty hot, so I always use a towel or a pot holder. The lid is not too hot, but I can go ahead and drop this right back into my canning water. And I'm just gonna keep going, repeating the same process until they're all full. I do want to warn you, the turmeric that's in here will stain everything it comes in contact with. So this is why I always wear an apron when I'm doing this. I wear an apron every time I'm in the kitchen. But I always wear an apron, and I use old towels or things that I can easily bleach because it will stain. I spilled a little bit on my kitchen knob a little bit ago, and even that white knob has stained. All right, we have all of our jars back in the water. I'm bringing it back up to temperature. It's starting to boil. You can see some bubbles coming up. I want it to boil, but I don't want it to boil so vigorously that it knocks the jars around and breaks them. So I'm gonna find that sweet spot and leave them in here for 10 minutes. All right, time for the heavy lifting. We're gonna take our jars out of the canner. Again, it doesn't have to be a canner. You can do this with any pot. Lift them out with a jar lifter and just tilt them a little bit to get the water off the top. I can already start to hear the sounds of the air escaping the top. You can catch that. They're still boiling inside a little bit. All right, once I get all these out of here, I'm gonna let them sit in this place until they're completely cool. I usually leave them here on our butcher block until the morning. You will hear the jars start to pop shortly, and that means that they have sealed down firmly to the glass. So don't touch the tops until you hear that popping happen, but the center section here will suck down and it'll pop. And then when they're completely cool tomorrow, I can take these rings off and we can store them without the rings. I always store without the rings. Sometimes when you take these off, you'll see a little stickiness inside. Some of the brine gets out and that sugar collects there. If you left the ring on, mold could grow underneath of that. So definitely take them off when you store them. Label the top of them when they're cool and store them up to, now the USDA would tell you about a year. I know I've left some in the basement for maybe 2 years or more, and they're still great when we open them up because they're completely sealed. I made too many, so I have an extra jar left over, and we got hungry while we were waiting for the jars to process, so we went ahead and made a sandwich. This is the best way to enjoy bread and butter pickles. We just put them on a sandwich or on a burger. They're sweet, they're a little tangy, and they're just delicious. I really appreciate you coming along with us to learn a little bit more about another way to process pickles. You can check out my other video on refrigerator dill pickles, which we love as well. But this is something completely different that everybody loves. If you don't think you can eat this many in a year, they make great gifts at Christmas. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.